Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. This is the SoapyRao show, if you're wondering where you've arrived. Today, I've got someone who's really, really interesting for many reasons. Well, as you know, I don't really do the entire bio, but I'm going to try getting as much as she's done because it's a lot of interesting work, from being a former investment banker to an author to the founder of an organization called Kahania, and a whole lot more. She's just a very interesting person all over. So, Debleena Majumdar, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Hey,
And I
my
think the
pleasure.
audience, yeah,
I think it's long overdue. I think we spoke at the beginning, or sometime mid last year.
correct.
I think Life Gone Wrong was just taking off, and you really helped me with, some ideas, and nothing really sort of materialized, but it was a really good chat. So I figured this is the best sort of platform to have you on. And man, what a cool set of things you're doing. I think I read somewhere that you love data and you love stories, and you found a way to marry both those in what you do. So first things first, like, how is it going, and how is your work front with Kahania and the things you're doing with corporates now, with things coming back on track after the lockdown, so-called ending right now. So how's work for you at this point in time?
Yeah, so I think it's good going a little back in time. It's true, as a kid, I was like the rare kid who loved both numbers and words. So I wanted
Yeah,
to be an archaeologist and I wanted to be a mathematician. And I felt I could do both.
yeah.
And I kind of didn't do either, but I also found a way to find my balance. And storytelling actually was like that balance or that raft which helps me bridge both the worlds.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think I chose a world of numbers because that came easy to me. So for a long time, I worked in the area of finding stories through numbers. So investment
Mhm.
banking, investment management, venture capital. That's what I
Mhm.
did for the longest time. But
Mhm.
I always loved music. So I love singing. I love writing.
Right.
And those were like my weekend pastimes.
Uh-huh.
And with Kahania, I think it was a way for me and my co-founder to bridge both
Mhm.
the worlds. So
This whole idea of weekend kind of hobbies or
yeah,
weekend thing, that's all changed. Right now, you can do whatever you want on whichever day, right? And
correct,
that's quite a
correct,
beautiful liberation from the Monday to Friday work week. But I,
completely.
but I want to understand this thing of investment banking, right? Right now, India is so-called the hot market where everyone wants to put money in, and everywhere, at least where I listen, there is this talk of billions and millions and VC-funded startups. But of course, you've been out of it for, I'm not sure exactly how long, but with a model, like, say, with my limited economics and my limited knowledge of these things, but you might be in a better position to answer this. When we look at, say, a capitalistic consumer model like America and the way they are consuming, and the idea of capitalism working there, and you scale that up with just the size and the sheer numbers we have in our country, and which is what the Amazons and the Flipkarts want eventually, right? And even you look at, in fact, someone the other day said a very interesting thing. He said, dude, when you speak English and you do a podcast in English, you're catering to the 100 million Indians. What I'm going for is 1.6 people who belong to Bharat. And I was like, whoa, okay, that put things in perspective, because yeah, fair enough, the languages that divide us and yet make us Indian. But as an investment, like, if we scale up to that kind of consumer pattern, I mean, of course, the money is going to follow the level of wealth. But as an investment banker, but now moving into this path, how do you kind of balance greed versus profit versus the sustainability of such a large nation?
Correct. I think this has partly been my journey. I
Mhm.
was in investment banking, venture capital, investment management, and then I made my journey into social impact. And last few
Yeah,
years, I've been working in that area. So
yeah,
the way I look at it is, it's not that capitalism is bad.
of course not.
You
Yeah,
need to obviously have a market mentality to make certain things work. But
yeah,
the way I think is, you need all three elements. You need the markets, you need governments, and you
Mhm.
also need what is called samaj, right? Citizenship and
Yeah,
citizen facing solutions. All
yeah,
these three have to work together for there to be real impact. And there are places where the markets are very efficient, where
hmm,
markets are solving for things, and that should happen, right?
yeah, yeah,
There are places where government needs to step in. For example, citizen services, right?
hmm,
Citizen services, for example, how you pay your taxes online, or how
yeah,
you kind of probably are able to if there is a grievance, you're able to complain about that, right?
yeah.
So these things government has to take care, right? And on the
Or in
other
some
hand,
countries, how you have countries covering their health services, right? Like
Health,
NHS or
exactly,
Sweden covering that
exactly,
thing. Yeah, yeah.
exactly, right? So governments have to kind of do that, and then there are areas where citizens,
Hmm.
can actually play a role, and that is what I think is very layered in India, given
Yeah,
what you mentioned, the multicultural and the multi, kind of level societies we have. Though
yeah,
50% of India lives in urban India, there are so many Indias,
yeah,
and every for a lot of companies, even there is a lot of investment coming in. There is no universal definition of India. So each of
yeah,
them are they are each of them are catering to one version of India, right?
yeah,
If
yeah.
you look at the large edtechs, for example, who they are catering to, if you look at some of the largest e-commerce companies they've been catering to, and
Mm,
increasingly the emerging story is of solving for Bharat, as you mentioned,
yeah.
which means reaching those postal codes. It means using the local languages. So a lot
Which I
more of
think is
that
great. Which I think is
is
great,
great.
which explores the vastness of our country, right?
Correct,
But I'm
correct,
just going to, sorry for interrupting. The reason I mentioned this is because at the same time, when you have to give people an opportunity, because once people know, okay, you know what, I now know what my options are, I will choose what to do with that. That being the person in the farthest reaches of India, when you give education and you give an opportunity and you give, as a result, various other avenues for them to explore. But sometimes I feel, and this, of course, not a blanket statement, is while there are a lot of opportunities and when there's playing to Bharat and getting these 1.6 billion people on the map of consuming and also exposure to the world out there. But I feel there are a lot of people who are exploiting it as opposed to
yes,
exploring the possibility. Because
yeah,
I think instead of setting a new trend, it's like, okay, America did this, Europe did this, let's do the same thing in India. Like I'm talking about, especially in my line of work, being entertainment, instead of breaking and sort of pushing the envelope, saying, let's create the strength of what these people can offer with the diversity of language, perspective, and also such diverse, rich stories. And this is where your storytelling passion comes in. When you hear, you don't need to write stories for Indians. You just get 10
correct,
random Indians from random places and different backgrounds in one room. You're going to come up with some of the richest stories. But as opposed
correct.
to giving that a shot, what people are doing is, let's fit this in the template of what we knew when we worked at MTV or what we knew when we worked at Star News, as opposed to using these OTT platforms to say, let's go wild with it and see what happens. We're just doing the same model that Europe does or America does, saying, okay, the influencers, okay, get them onto the platform, and we have the same model repeating itself. Do you sense that in some way?
I think it's still there probably because of who are the decision makers, right? So
Yeah,
for any decisions to be taken, you need that body or the group of people to be that diverse, right?
yeah, and
So
or that risk taking, because I think we are
that risk
averse to
taking.
this. Yeah, I want to
Yeah.
talk about that next.
Yeah. So, for example, in social impact, when we look at impact driven organizations, we talk about this, right? The
Yeah,
community voice. The most authentic voice and the most authentic wisdom is in the community. You're not going to come and solve it from outside. We don't
yeah,
know from an ivory tower what's happening,
yeah.
somewhere in a small village. And that wisdom lies in the community. So, the more
Hmm.
and more important thing is to get that wisdom a voice, give that wisdom
Yeah,
in a voice.
empower the grassroots
Exactly,
actions. Yeah, yeah,
which could
absolutely.
happen through storytelling, and
Yeah,
there is some amount of work happening in that giving people a voice across wherever they are, doesn't matter where they are, because digital is one way of empowerment.
mm-hmm.
Technology is another way of empowerment. For example, what we see today with UPI, with the digital payments, this
Yeah,
wasn't the case some decades earlier. So a lot more people have gone online, and with that, lot more opportunities have opened up in their
mm.
choice, in their language, etc. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I think, as you rightly mentioned, unless these are done with the right intentions, you
Yeah,
can go wrong in the sense that it could be exploited as a market to sell,
yeah,
rather than actually find a way to bring in that voice, to do something
yeah.
more original and to do something more relevant
And
for
truly
that.
unique to a country, right? Because
Correct,
I mean, my notion of globalization is that you have a set number of countries, but what you
correct,
don't have is a set number of interactions. So as a
correct,
result, a person sitting in India like you, writing a story in the language that you are comfortable, whether it's English, whether it's another regional language, but you write that, and I mean, we have the power right now of different translations. We have direct, like instantaneous translations, interpretation.
correct,
So you can literally, your story can reach someone sitting in Siberia right now. That's the
correct.
power of globalization. But what I have a sense of regret sometimes when I hear is, it's the same Indians, the same five Indians catering to the same 500 million Indians. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm obviously
Yeah,
generalizing and I'm making it very sort of generic, but it's not obviously that simple. But like, the beauty of something like this is to, of course, each to each his own, or to each individual their own preference. But when you have so much to offer from each individual, the idea of globalization is to bring this to the common platform, which is the world. as opposed
Correct.
to saying there is a Spotify India, there is an Audible America, there is
Correct.
a Amazon Europe. They're making it more, and this kind of plays into what's happening with politics. And you look at it is where you make people into pockets where they're easier to manage. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Where you
Correct.
kind of, as you said, exploit them. When I mean exploit, is it's almost like keep them greedy enough, but yet keep them well informed enough so that only what we want them to know they know, kind of thing.
Correct. Correct.
So,
Correct. Correct. So I think, for me, it's about, the frame with which you look at it, right? So
yeah.
if you look at it like, only you know best and you
Mm,
can solve the problem which someone else is feeling,
yeah.
then this tendency comes, replicate something which comes from somewhere else. That's a easy, maybe tried and tested model, but,
Yeah.
a more unproven, but probably much more, organic and maybe much more beautiful model is to
Yeah.
take what is there and then give it, help with technology and with voice and choice, etc.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I love that
That,
idea. You said
yeah,
empowering the local, the wisdom, the community
correct,
wisdom, right? That sounds so
correct.
perfect because instead of me or you going to a sort of, say, a rural area with our own learning or so-called expertise from our courses or from our academia, and we're like, no, no, what we've learned is that when you take this model, apply to this village in this level of sustainability, but there may be 10 other people there who are doing it ground up. So
Yeah,
it makes
and
so
they
much
know
more.
so much more. Now, I'll give you a
Yeah.
practical example. So, I've been doing a lot of work in education. So,
Hmm.
I remember for one of our, we were researching for an open schooling platform, which,
Yeah.
we had built for kids who are not able to finish their schooling through normal channels.
So
So, open
open
schooling.
source schooling platform being a platform where anyone can come and sign up in a particular curriculum and get a certification. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so India has open schooling system called NIOS, National Open Schooling, right?
Okay.
And a lot of
Okay.
people, who are not able to finish their schooling through a normal school,
Hmm.
affiliated to CBSE, ICC, state boards, etc., they
Yeah.
can still get the benefit of their 10th and 12th by,
Okay.
NIOS. So we basically, created a system where we simplified NIOS, again, using storytelling and
Hmm.
different languages so that
Hmm.
people could get this benefit, right? Now,
Hmm.
we were doing research for this to understand what do people do. One is there is drop off, which happens at every stage in education, grade 10, grade 12, and a lot of it, unfortunately, still for girls, they face higher drop offs. And
Hmm.
then it happens again when you think of going to college and then to work, right? So these are
Yeah.
different drop off points. So we were talking to a group of girls from a very small town to understand their choices. Is it that they are limiting themselves about what they want to do, or is it they have certain dreams but they don't get the chance, and this could be
Right.
one chance. And we were so surprised. So this group of girls, very articulate, right? So they were speaking in their own language, is very articulate. And what they said is, we were trying to think of what kind of careers, do they aspire for. And you won't believe it, it's not the standard careers we think of. So
Hmm.
one girl says she wants to be a YouTuber, right? Or
Hmm.
Instagrammer. She
Hmm.
actually said, I want to be an Instagrammer.
Right.
So, and so imagine the power of somebody sitting in a small, probably not that well connected village or town,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
technology has still reached them, and they also have ambitions which are seemingly, we think, only urban kids can
Urban.
have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, in
and
fact, you know what's just on that point, what's in
yeah,
fact crazy about India is the YouTubers aren't, at least from my knowledge, at least what's going viral on a consistent basis is, of course, number one, regional, being
yes,
Hindi and the other myriad languages. And it's also the people from smaller towns. In
correct,
fact, the
correct,
smaller ones, the smaller towns, or the small ones from smaller towns explode that much quicker because
correct.
they have this sense. And I don't know what it is. Since you mentioned this, I just sort of thought of this point. What happens is if you're in a city, right? Like you and I are city sort of born and bred people. And if we if you and I go make fun of a YouTuber from, I mean, if not, like say for instance, we do a mock review, right? They have these reaction videos. And if you're doing it of a Bollywood thing, it's fine. But if you do it of someone else, there's this thing that you can't punch down. You know what I mean? And for
Correct.
all fairness, of course, I think you can't unnecessarily punch down. But I think it should be democratic where you punch up or punch down. But what tends to happen is there's this place where Indians from the smaller towns want to mock the urban Indian. You know what I mean? Which I think is all great and fun. I'm not here to be critical of what they do. But I think as a sense of it, because of our sheer numbers, even if you're a small person, say from Ranchi, and you go viral saying this is for all people from Ranchi, you're still hitting about a 40, 50 million, people. It's crazy with our numbers. But
Yeah.
do you sense The reason I brought this up of, like a reversal of urban versus rural India is to this point of when you say we do through storytelling, right? Um, do you think, okay, before that I'd mention another point, let's just finish that. Is Do you think as someone who's been in the social impact space, also in the investment space, and now in this place where all of it comes together in some shape, what is your opinion about Indians and sticking their neck out or taking risks when it comes to outlandish, or even not even that outlandish, even something against the grain? Is it in us, or can we make even a statement like that?
I think it's so. I think we can't make a generalization. It's in some people,
Yeah.
whether they are Indians, whether they are from a different nationality. I think some of us definitely have this grain of sticking our neck out and doing
Mm.
something more. I think it comes from a place of where do you get your satisfaction, right? Is it
Yeah.
from that monthly salary? Is it
Mm.
from doing something and feeling good about it?
Mm.
Is it from learning?
Mm.
What gives you that satisfaction, right? So for me, for example, I had a very happy and so-called satisfying job, but I wasn't learning and I wasn't kind of getting that
Growing. Yeah.
I wasn't growing, right? So I took a very risky, and I think my parents, probably they are professors, so they probably thought I've gone mad, like midlife
Yeah. Yeah.
midlife crisis. But but yeah, I think so. And I'm just one example, and I did it in my own small way. But there are
Yeah.
people who face much tougher circumstances, but who are
Mm.
able to stick their neck out. So I think
Yeah.
it goes back to very individual kind of choices about what
Yeah.
gives them that motivation, and what gives them the ability to stick through, because it's not easy. Whenever you
Yeah.
choose to go off the beaten path, we shouldn't romanticize it because it's not easy.
And it's not
It's a
easy. Along with, also we have this thing which is the collective Indian approval,
yes,
right?
correct,
Whether it's the units, whether it's the smaller family or the larger
correct,
family, or it's the
correct,
community of that, where they're kind of like, oh, which is all great in hindsight when the person does well. Like now
correct,
we look back going, wow, amazing that, but like
correct,
we celebrate directors, or like movie storytellers. Especially, I'm going to stick to
correct.
storytellers, because
Yes,
that's the
yes,
one where it's a lot of failure, and a lot of people like,
correct.
I told him not to do that, and I'll give you an example. My grandfather's elder brother is this Kannada poet, was this Kannada poet, Shivram Karant, right? And he was, of course, he's lauded, and still till date, a lot of his work is being made into movies. And of course, now a lot of people hold him in high esteem. But I don't know what it was for him growing up, or sort
Mm,
of being in a place near Mangalore called Kota in that time, what the sort of thing on him was. How do people look at him? Because yeah, these things are always great when you're a bestseller, or when you get an award, or but we don't really support people that much. I mean, I think for me, and maybe in your case, my family's been great about it. And also, I didn't let go of like a
mm.
job that paid me $1 million a year. It was like, I didn't really have much going, so I could make this transition into comedy and podcasting. But someone like you having a job in an investment bank, or as an investment banker, it's a lot more of a risk to drop it all. So it's quite cool what you're doing. And
Yeah, but I think just to your point, Sandeep.
yeah.
So yeah, I think people try to box you in, and the
Mm.
people try to kind of give you wisdom, the
Yeah.
standard wisdom of following a particular path and reaching a particular place. But the way I look at it is, in life, so in school, a lot of it comes from educational conditioning, right? So in
Hmm.
school, for example, we are told to follow, a lot of schools, right, they're told to follow certain rules, and you kind of mold yourself in that fashion. But
Yeah.
I feel in life, and this has been my learning, I think in life you only reach somewhere, and you only kind of find true answers when you stand out, right? When you're able to question the
Yeah.
choices,
Yeah.
and when you're just not following the flow. From a storytelling parlance, I think of it as just three levels, right, of
Yeah.
interconnected stories. First, we are all finding our stories.
Yeah.
Some of us find it very easy. Some of us are
Yeah.
God gifted, and we kind of are very easily we find our path. Some of us take more time, and that's completely fine. Each of us,
Yeah.
have our own time to find it.
What makes
Then
us
we
each unique, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Then we tell our stories. I think
Yeah.
that's also something we do all the time. All of us are
Hmm.
telling our stories. But, for some people, there's a disconnect between the story they tell and the story they find, right? And
Mm.
that's where we have to go deeper and say, I think all of us have gone through that journey, and therefore we made certain shifts or choices.
Yeah.
Some people probably are not able to do that because of circumstances, which is really sad. Some people do
Yeah.
it. They have the guts to, no matter what, take that choice, which is very,
Yeah.
very hard, as you mentioned. Um,
And I think that's
I
where the word authentic is so important, right? Because when your
Authentic is so
story
important.
when
Correct.
what you're living and the story you
Yeah.
know at that point in time is what you're telling. That is the biggest sort of a sense of this is who I am, as
Correct.
opposed to this facade you build for yourself, hiding behind this, especially with the digital world, this ability to create this virtual character who's not really you.
Correct.
The disconnect
Correct.
is so much more easier to rely on. So
Correct.
the third thing you were going to say, you said one is finding your story, second is telling your story, and the third thing,
Third is living the story, which is what
yeah,
comes back to authenticity, right? So
right,
finally, even after we have made that hard choice, which we
yeah,
think is imperative for us, it's
yeah,
not going to be easy, right? We are
yeah,
still going to have moments of abject failure. So, for
yeah.
example, I've chosen entrepreneurship and writing, both of which are filled with risk and failure,
It's a
right?
lot of
So
anxiety in those
it's a
both
lot of
those lines.
anxiety,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it
yeah,
is not going to be smooth. So accepting
yeah,
that and still finding moments of small happiness, I know,
yeah.
sticking with it, right? No matter what.
Absolutely. 3 years back, if you told me this, I would have been like, no, but there has to be a big win as an artist, as
Yeah,
an author. There has to be that one thing, the Pulitzer. It has to be something, right, which drives you.
correct.
But I've realized, the same person that's me now, the story. And I'm just going to add one more point before I make
Yeah,
this is when you said finding your story, telling your story, and living your story. I think there's maybe a fourth or maybe a one before the first one, right? Is at times unlearning your story,
correct,
because
correct, correct.
sometimes there's a narrative which has been sort of drilled into you, or maybe kind of coerced, or maybe gently kind of massaged into you through social
Yeah,
conditioning.
condition. Yeah,
Yeah. And what happens sometimes, you just live it unconsciously. You're like, yeah, why am I like this? No, you don't. You're just like, you know what, I have to wake up, I have to go to school, then I have to graduate, I have to go to college, then I have to get an MBA, I have to get a job, I have to get married, I have to have kids, I have to find an apartment, then I have to retire. And not obviously, this is a very general story, but
yeah,
I know, and what I find sometimes is unlearning and stripping away all these things that have been layered onto you. Sometimes people mean the best, but it comes with their perception, right, of what you
correct,
should be. And I find that the stripping away, which I told you 3 years back to now, is what's happened in some way. Because you say, you
correct,
know what, I would do 90 things because I'm expected to do it. Whether it's meeting people, whether it's speaking in a certain way, whether it's pandering to how they want you to live, and maybe 10% is what you really want to do. But if you flip that on its head and say 90% to 95% is what, even if it's two activities, even if it's an entrepreneur and it's a storyteller, or in my case, if I'm just doing yoga, not because I want to stand on my head, but because
yeah,
I'm excited about waking up in the morning, something as simple as that, it really just, that's where living your story comes into playing.
correct,
You
correct,
could be a person who's got the most exciting life on paper. They wake up, they have
correct,
100 meetings, they're jet setting across the world, they're eating the most amazing food, and they post everything on Instagram, and you're just like, my God, how fucking amazing is this guy? But next thing you know, the person is just a shell, because none of that
correct,
is filtering into the living the story. But when you
correct,
meet someone else who's just doing something, as I don't know why I'm picking this example, but something like organic farming, they seem to be very happy. I don't know whether it's in the manure or it's in the soil, but they just one activity, but they're living that through and through, and it's so
correct,
beautiful that more and more people like you and more people are doing this thing, whether it's not about filling their slate with 100 things, but it's 2, 3 things that they really want to do.
correct. And I think being able to give it everything,
Yeah.
for example, writing, I don't think I'm the best writer. I think I just am very dedicated. And for
Mm.
me, it's like, I think somebody famous long time back said this, that writing is an art in which you'll never find perfection. So
Yeah.
I believe that, you keep trying, and
And
there's
I
always a better
think
way to write.
And I think there's a beauty in that imperfection that makes it.
Yeah,
See, if we
correct.
all wrote in the perfect way, with the perfect diction, with the perfect grammar, with the perfect style, if I don't know what the books on writing are, but like, I read the book by what's the guy's name? Um, Gosh, these names are not Stephen Hawking. The this not, gosh, I don't know why I'm forgetting his name. Stephen King, the
Yeah,
book
Stephen
on
King. Yeah.
writing, right?
Yeah,
So the thing, for me, I'll tell you why I mentioned this, is because I'm not a writer um, by example. I'm very bad because I get bored, in the sense, once I write something, it's out of my head. I hate going back and editing it. I just
correct.
can't revisit
Which
it.
is
Yeah,
90% of writing is editing.
which is
Yeah.
90% of the work. So I'm thinking, my God, does that make me a bad writer? And as you said, no. But with today's technology and with today's access to people who like doing things, there's some people, in fact, you'd be surprised, who like editing, who like
Who are brilliant editors. Yeah.
and brilliant at it. They love
Yeah.
that organizational sort of perspective they can put on it, going, you know what, I like making logic out of this person's
Yeah.
creation. And that's beautiful if two people can find each other like that. And with the
Correct.
internet, with social media, that's where the power is. But
Correct.
I'm
Correct.
like, why should I even write nowadays? I don't need to physically sit and type. I can just narrate this, send it to
Yeah.
someone, or feed it through a software, and that's the beauty of it. So
Correct.
when the reason I sort of I talk a lot, I'm sorry, but
No,
when
but that's
you
good. I think that's one form of expression, right? So I look at all of these, whether it's writing or music or art or
yeah,
comedy. These are all forms of expression.
yeah,
So we are, as long as we are being authentic and true to ourselves, and we are having fun. I think
yeah,
having fun is also too really important. And
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
some people are finding value from it. That's great.
I
That
mean, I
some
do this
people.
podcast because I just love talking,
Correct.
and told my wife this. It's not about what Debleena's done. It's about
Yeah.
what brought her to make her do what she's doing. You know what I
Correct.
mean? There's so much that goes into making you an
Yeah, that's
individual, right?
correct.
And
Correct.
also, not just individual. It makes you into this person, which is a larger connect to the community you live in.
Correct.
And
Correct.
if I only talk about, say, your book, or I only talk about your thing, which of course we'll talk about, but I want to talk about what shaped you into this person that wants to do these things, which I think
Correct.
is so important for everyone to understand, because you might not connect on one level with the person, but there are 100
Yeah.
other things about
Some
you
level.
which will connect with 100 other one aspect of people. And
Correct. Correct.
this thing of being unconventional in what you're doing, I think, is a very cool thing, because I think by not being the best writer, by not being the perfect writer, I think what happens as a result is you find your best expression through that imperfection. Like,
Hmm.
it becomes a style, and I think that is so important as a writer. I'm sure you've read a lot of different authors from different genres, different
Yeah, I
age
read
groups.
like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you probably have seen this, right? The authors you like the most are these authors who have these certain quirks, which you might also call imperfections, which are, like some people now will say, Charles Dickens' sentences were the craziest, longest sentences, but that's what made him Charles Dickens, amongst the
Yeah.
other things. But I mean, some people like simpler style, some people like this, and everyone, there's a reader for everyone, I believe.
Correct.
And I, in
Correct.
fact, spoke to this lady who's an author for children's books, and she said the same thing. She's like, you can't just say one way is the best way. But
Correct.
what I want to ask you, sorry if I'm jumping the gun, but when you say with your education company, which you started, I forget the name, I'm sorry, or even with,
Chabi.
sorry,
Chabi.
Chabi, okay, and with this organization you have now, you use the word through storytelling a lot. So can you, in both cases, give me an example of how you use storytelling to drive home the social impact in the first
Correct.
case or in the second case?
Correct. So let me talk about Chabi first.
Hmm.
So here, what we did is we were looking at this um, the group of people, which is a pretty large group of people who are not able to finish schooling through traditional methods.
Yeah.
So they may be homeschooling, or they may be completely out of school. They may be adults who didn't get to finish school, or they may be studying in
Okay.
even alternative schools, etc. It's a pretty diverse group of people. So the open schooling information is already available. It's already there, but it's not accessible very easily. A, because it was in English, a lot of it, and B, because the books are often very difficult to complete. They are, a lot of people are not used to reading so much, especially when you're
Hmm.
reading alone and you don't have teacher or family support.
Hmm.
So storytelling as a principle to simplify things is something I really believe in. So what
Yeah.
we did is we chose the different subjects which we could offer, because NIS gives you the flexibility of choosing any 5 subjects to study and to clear the exam in. So every subject, we created a multiverse of characters. So
Okay.
there were 8 to 10 characters we created, and a lot of this was influenced by the communities we visited and the local stories which we heard from them. So there's a grandmother who loves technology. There's an
Mhm.
uncle who loves traveling, who's an economist. There is a young boy who is very entrepreneurial and who's very good at sports and who
Yeah.
wants to become an entrepreneur. There's this girl who's really good in studies and who wants to become a banker. So we
Right.
came up with these cast of characters, and every subject has one of these characters as the main character. And what
Okay.
we do is, through that subject, while you're learning the subject, at different points of time, we introduce very small moment of time, a slice of life kind of moment from that character. And then the other
Ah.
characters also appear in that. But
Right.
what happens is, subconsciously or unconsciously, you are learning the subject, of course, but you're also getting hooked onto a character's journey, which is what the storytelling does, right? You're also believing in
Right.
the character and the character's journey and the narrative, and through that you're going
You're
deeper,
vouching for his or her success, and
and you're
you're kind
going
of,
deeper.
yeah.
Yeah, and you're going deeper into the subject. For example, in entrepreneurship, we actually ask about these choices entrepreneurs have to make, right? How much
Mhm.
risk can the person take? Is a person actually someone who will be able to be comfortable figuring out all different aspects of marketing and developing a business, finding a
Yeah.
team, all of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
when So I think, and those are choices you have to make if you are really choosing to be an entrepreneur. Similarly, in economics, right? So we ask questions around ethics and economics, right?
Hmm.
So it gives you a chance through the vision of a story without being too pedantic about it, to
Yeah.
ask questions which the characters will face. So that's one
Hmm.
example in the
Hmm.
case of Chabi. On the
That's really
other
cool,
side,
though, because sorry, I'm just thinking
yeah,
about this approach, because what tends to happen is, sometimes I just sit back and I'm like, man, we'd love to think of the fact that we are open-minded and we understand the plight of Indians, but man, it's such a big country, right? I'm just saying the vastness of and the diversity in people. So when you're doing this, like, what tends to happen is people usually would have a Salman Khan who's a hero, or
yeah,
a Shah Rukh, or a Tendulkar, or some would say, okay, a Bezos or a Musk or a Abdul Kalam or whatever it may be. But creating these local heroes, these people that are so similar to the person who is vouching for them, who's backing them, saying, I'm learning through you, so do something good, is so empowering. It must be amazing to um, find out what it's probably, how are the results like from doing something like this.
yeah. So I think we've started off, kind of the product itself because some time to build, because we did everything on our own,
Yeah, yeah.
writing these stories, developing all the content. So right now it's just gone live, and we are finding students. Students are reaching out to us, and they're finding the content interesting. It'll take us a
Excellent.
year more to realize, how they are able to use it to actually clear their exams. I think
Yeah,
that is still a year away, but
yeah,
we already see good signs in terms of people finding the content itself engaging and not giving
yeah,
up. We don't want people to give up because they find it hard, because education, in
yeah.
my view, should not be hard. It should not
Should be
be
enjoyable for
elitist. It
sure.
should not be difficult. It should not be overwhelming. So,
I
but
think, yeah, for
what you
anyone,
said,
yeah, I think for all of
yeah,
us, elitists, all these different things are such barriers.
correct,
Even when like history was taught, like about the Mughals, you're like, oh, you don't. I mean, or your civics was taught about you're like, oh God, it's just tedious. I would have loved to learn like this. And in fact, uh, when I read, say, like whether it's fantasy fiction or whether I read like historical fiction, and I read about, say, the Battle of Malta, I'm in fact learning, and I'm like, in fact,
correct. You
learning
are
more than
learning.
I ever learned than being taught by a teacher.
Correct,
So
correct.
it's amazing that you're mentioning this. And sorry if I was just thinking of
No,
how
no, no.
to how,
That's fine.
how the
And I think what you said, that is an insight we actually got from the communities we visited. That we asked them, who do you look up to? Who's your role model?
yeah,
And we were very surprised that they actually mentioned people from the community. They didn't
yeah,
mention the most famous people, right? Because the most famous people, they're very far removed from the daily lives. So it's
yeah,
actually people from within the community who influence them, which is why we kind of rooted the stories in
hmm,
characters, they would have seen and who look like them, talk like them. Um,
yeah,
and similarly, right now I'm actually writing, I'm in the process of writing that book. I think another big gap I see in education is the amount of time and the amount of importance we give to financial literacy for
hmm,
kids who are in schools, right? So we
yeah,
teach people a lot of other languages, and we teach people mathematics, etc. But finally you have
hmm,
to, the biggest thing in life, why a lot of people are stuck to jobs they may not enjoy, they cannot take the risks to do really what they, for their living the
yeah,
story moments, right, is because of
yeah.
financial pressures, right? So
I mean, at
financial
the end of the day,
literacy,
it's very romantic to say money is not important, but it is. You
money
need to
is
live.
so
Yeah,
my biggest, and probably because I come from a finance background, I know money is important, and I
yeah,
could make certain choices because I was used to saving, and I knew that this much of kind of cushion will help me when I make
yeah,
some decisions like this. So
yeah,
financial literacy, I think, is important. So the other thing
yeah.
I'm doing now, I'm actually writing a book again, introducing kids, early teens, to financial literacy, but using storytelling. So
Oh,
basically, I'm
nice.
using stories that they like. Could be Avengers, could be
Right. Harry
uh,
Potter. Yeah.
Harry Potter, and then asking questions around certain moments in the movies which are actually
Yeah.
financial if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
like
Absolutely.
Iron Man, right? So when Iron Man gave up the weapons business, how
Yeah.
did he finance the different very expensive suits of the
I got a
Avengers, right?
horrible joke there. He became a Dhobi. Iron Man.
So
Sorry.
I think there are many financial moments, there are many economic moments, and there are a lot
Yeah.
of very deep truths in kids, so-called kids and teenagers movies. Hunger Games, for example, it's
Yeah.
really interesting. So yeah, I'm using
Do you like
those.
that book? Did you like reading it?
Hunger Games.
Yeah.
So at one, so it's a book, I think, which had both reactions from me. One is,
Uh huh.
I did like the journey of the characters and the metaphor which the author used, so that
Mm.
there could be a dystopian world like this where you
Yeah.
fight to live, and hunger is your
Yeah.
biggest kind of
No, because there's another
aim.
one which is out now apparently on Netflix called Squid Games, which is
I've
similar,
not
right?
seen. I'm
So
not
apparently
seen.
the premise is that it's a show where people who are in the sort of the depths of their social downfall, whether it's people who haven't paid back debts, or whether someone who's going through a horrible legal sort of suit, or someone who's going through a horrible breakup. So what they do is they give them a chance. It's usually more financially motivated to play kids games, and the winner gets billions or millions of rupees or dollars, whatever the currency is. But the person who loses is killed. So
Yeah. So I
this
think that
apparently has
is the
gone
part.
viral across the thing. I mean, I want to talk to you about that later, but I'm saying
Yeah.
these things are crazy, right? Like when you use these stories, like the reason I mentioned Hunger Games is because the first book, which is of course the Hunger Games, is great in the sense that you hear how this girl is fending for her sister and her mother. I haven't watched the movie; I'm just talking about the book, and
Yeah.
just this sort of thing, how she's able to sort of break the rules enforced by the man, as they call it, right, in America, the
Correct.
man or the institution,
The
to go to this
capital.
the capital, and how she goes and hunts and learns how to fend for herself, and then and as you said, the metaphor is much more larger, but also how she steps in and saves her sister. Then you have that guy Peter who's helping her, and then you go to like book number 4, and then it's kind of, I don't know, just I'm saying from a very story point of view, I think that's called what's the fourth one? I think it's Hunger Games catching something.
Catching Fire or Mockingjay, I think.
That's the third one. I think there's a fourth one after that, isn't there?
Okay, I have not read. I have read three.
Yeah, the third one
Uh,
is beautiful. I mean, they're all great books, and I think it's very, like, when the cornucopia, the descriptions are mind blowing, and I
yeah.
really enjoyed it for that. And I like that in a story when it has three, four things which are not glaring you in the face.
Correct. 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 So yeah, but I think stories are like that, right? So they
Yeah,
can reach you at multiple levels. So
yeah,
somebody might just look at it as Katniss' journey of redemption or whatever,
yeah, yeah,
her finding her story. Somebody else might look at what is the government doing, right? The
yeah,
government of that time doing, and
yeah,
somebody else might look at it from a completely economic point of view. How
yeah.
do people kind of make money in a society like this? So there are
And
so
also,
many
if you look at it,
levels.
it's a personification of the caste system, right?
Correct.
Each district
Correct.
is a different caste. Like one is
Exactly.
specifically only mining, others
Correct.
only
One is
growing bread,
fishing. Correct.
fishing.
Correct.
Exactly. So it's and does it work? Because
So
someone's
does
like,
it work?
and this is something, I had a conversation with someone. I said the caste system is completely misinterpreted, right? Because it's not about having castes within society. It's about having a different caste within yourself, where
Correct.
you are
Correct.
able to clean your crap. You're able to
Correct.
also have a business sense, which you said, the financial
Correct.
literacy, or an idea of not being a fool and being scammed. And the other one is you
Correct.
have to fight for your rights and your beliefs. And
Correct.
the final thing is you have to have a sense of spirituality, which is a connection with God. So these are the
Correct.
4 or 5 castes that are set up. But everyone said, you know what? Like, as you mentioned, there are people who use this to benefit society and mankind. And there'll be people who exploit it, which is what happens, sadly.
Correct. Exactly. So, but so and there are many stories like that, right? So
Yeah.
the best thing about them is they are not yes and no stories. They're not like
Yeah.
everything is good or everything is bad. There are
Yeah.
many less. So what I'm doing in this book is introducing kids to financial literacy
Yeah.
using again storytelling as a medium. So that's a second example.
Right.
The third is like you mentioned, kahaniya, right? A
Yeah.
social impact and storytelling. So I feel and this is something I discovered while I started working in social impact. My
Mm-hmm.
feeling was social impact because you're solving such wicked problems of hunger, maybe
Mm-hmm.
poverty is one of the biggest wicked problems, then
Yeah.
jobs, right, then education, healthcare, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
urban transformation. So automatically I felt your goal is so beautiful that it's easy
Yeah.
to tell your story, and storytelling is something which you would automatically do, so you do, and funders
Mm-hmm.
and founders both realize it. But the stories are so difficult, right,
Yeah.
because these problems are not solved with just service delivery. You are so
Yeah.
many other people who are like almost like it's almost like you pass the baton to so many people to
Yeah.
actually have the problem solved. A simple thing like a sewerage cleaning system
Mm-hmm.
has so many people in the if something goes wrong, how to
Yeah.
actually change that has so many people in that story, right?
Yeah.
So and so
And
I
I think
think,
we also have this set. And do you think, I'm just adding this in because you mentioned the
yeah,
sewage, and that I also feel we have this thing. I think maybe it's born out of the way we have looked at humans, with whether it's complexion, color, etc. Do you think there's a deficit of respecting job? Like, something like a carpenter or a plumber
yeah,
in, say, Switzerland is paid quite well, and
yeah,
they can survive on it. In fact, survive well, and they're respected. One carpenter comes, they take pride in their job, and they do it well. But here, And this is a result. Like say say you get Stardust guy to come and fix your dish at home. There are 5 guys wandering in. One guy's doing the actual work, and the other 4 are just sort of fame by association. You know what I mean? So do you think like through your stories, that's something important to empower and to give a sense of respect and dignity to all jobs? Because someone
Correct.
who's cleaning the sewage is putting his life or her life, and I think in more cases than not, it's men doing this. Where you hear these stories where because of the buildup of gases that's exploded, the manhole covers. It is, I mean, let's be honest. I don't think you and I, even if you want to, can do it. It's terrifying going into
Yeah.
these depths, bowels of our cities without protection, and putting yourself at, I don't know what is living down there, right? And but we still pay them what? We pay them less than minimum wage. We look at them as they are like feces. But do you think through stories, when you do this, you're actually able to change the perception? Obviously, one is to give them a better sense of livelihood, a better um, protection when they do this work, and also recognize as someone who's essential to our society, right?
Correct, correct, correct. I think definitely, I think that's where I feel, a lot of my work has been in
Hmm.
storytelling and social impact. It's this intersection, knowing that every such problem
Yeah,
has a multi-layered solution. So there is a livelihood angle, a dignified
yeah,
livelihood angle.
yeah,
There is a technology angle, right? So some of these, why can't technology be used to automate some of these things, where
yeah. Why
it's
can't
really
we?
difficult,
Yeah,
yeah, for people to actually, do this. And it is happening, smart washrooms, for example. Some of
yeah,
those things are coming up right now.
yeah,
Then there's a third layer, which is, for people who are excluded from technology, how do you almost have a, citizen facing layer, right? Like, for example,
yeah,
senior citizens, many
yeah.
of them may not be comfortable using technology. So how do you have, group
Hmm.
of people who can help them get
Yeah.
used to this technology? There's a training and a
I
enablement
think
layer.
that was amazing during the lockdown. A lot of these
Correct,
volunteers who came together
correct,
and helped people who are living alone, especially geriatric, the
correct,
population, where
correct,
they couldn't
correct,
dunzo stuff, they couldn't Swiggy
correct,
stuff. So these guys would go drop it, which I think is mind-blowingly
correct.
considerate, right?
Correct. So I think that's why I mentioned, these three aspects of government service and,
Yeah,
citizen, as well as markets. All three have to work for some of these problems to really find a solution. And these are multi-decade, if not multi-generational problems. It will take so many
absolutely.
years.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you
therefore,
just ask someone who's in their 60s right now, my dad's age, maybe 70s. You say, you know what, you were used to life in a certain way, right? That you could drive to work, to the factory, you would wake up every morning, you would eat this, and this is what your parents ate and their parents ate. But you tell them, like, I like someone who's probably got age-related macular degeneration, or who's got arthritis, who's got borderline Parkinson. Tell them use a cane. My God, they are so stubborn. I'm saying being stubborn is across the board, right, for various issues, and it's generational. People are like, no, I'm fine. And next thing you know, it's they fall and they have thing, and then we don't have geriatric care. I'm saying this is obviously not connected to social impact, but these are the same sort of themes across different stories.
correct, correct. No, true. And I think what you brought in is one more layer, which
Yeah,
is the behavioral science layer. That
yeah, yeah,
sometimes you have the best solutions to
yeah,
problems, which are very logical, which are very practical,
yeah,
but change doesn't happen. And this is
yeah,
one more thing I've seen in social impact. Change doesn't happen because of the way we behave as
yeah,
humans, right? And
yeah,
we think we are rational, but many times we're not. For example,
yeah.
one of my friends who works in behavioral science, and I'll introduce
Hmm.
him to you. He's a really learned guy. So he
Amazing.
spoke to
Yeah.
me spoke to me about this, right? Imagine there's a
I forgot
gym
to tell you
at the
that's a
top.
prerequisite for the podcast. You have to introduce another guest to me.
Yeah,
I'm
definitely,
joking.
I'll do that. So imagine there's an escalator, there's a gym at the top, and there's an escalator and a staircase leading up to
Yeah.
the gym,
Yeah.
right? So if that's an image we can think of, and it's safe to go to the gym,
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
So which one would you take to go to the gym, right? So a lot of people would say, I'll take the staircase because anyway, I'm going up to the gym to
So it's
exercise.
a warm
But
up. Yeah.
so it's a warm up. But many other people would say, I'll take the escalator
Yeah.
because I'm going to the gym. So
Yeah.
anyway, I will get exercise. Let me now, save some calorie, save
Yeah.
some time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is classic, human behavior, right?
Mm.
You can't predict that, because an intervention is planned in a particular way,
Yeah.
humans will behave in exactly the same way,
A
right?
very strange thing you mentioned, this escalator thing. Have you noticed, like in a mall where you have staircases, or even in an airport, right? And the escalators usually are right next to the staircases. So now, when the escalator stops working, people still take the escalator.
Yeah, correct,
Have you?
correct. It's
What do you
like,
have to say
right
about?
now while I'm walking up, it'll become fine. So,
Yeah,
that,
that is
that
hope, and I think Indians thrive on hope that
we
someday
thrive on
something.
hope. Yeah, but I think that's the reason why a lot of times, a seemingly very practical social
Yeah,
solution for
yeah,
a problem which is really wicked may not
Yeah.
work that easily. You have to think of
Yeah.
all these angles. Again, where storytelling comes in front and center.
Absolutely. I'm going to tell
What
you a
we
story
saw,
on that escalator front. Sorry, because this is
yeah,
hilarious. You need to hear this. Going up in this mall in Bombay, there was a comedy store. Was there? It was called the Palladium Mall, right? And
yeah,
going
I
up
think
to the
I've
first
been
floor.
there.
Yeah, it's the Phoenix
Palladium.
Mills. It's one of a really
Yeah,
nice
yeah, yeah.
place, and I had to go for the show. So going up the escalator. Sorry, I don't know what it was. I think I was walking up the stairs. Escalator was not working, and these people were walking next to me. The escalator started working. Guess what they did? Just take a wild guess.
Jumped
They
off.
they walked back down and got on the escalator. I was like, what? I thought maybe I should do it. And for a second, the Indianness in me was like, dude, everyone's doing it. I should do it as well.
Yeah, no, but I think
Uh,
the thing is, we see this so many times, right? That
yeah,
we don't behave in exactly the way we think we should be behaving, right? I mean,
yeah,
we saw it with vaccines, not just in India, globally, right? I mean,
yeah,
we saw it with vaccine hesitancy. We see it with so many things, right? That behavior is not always what is predicted, which is why
yeah.
some of these social challenges have to have one more layer of behavioral
Absolutely.
science nudges
I think
incorporated
that's
in
the
the
most important when it comes to application. Because, of
yes,
course, you can have the policies, you can have the initiatives, you can have the funding, you can have the tech, you can have even the army of people executing the tech. But if a person's going to say, no, I want this the way, like, when the volcano erupts, people are like, no, no, I'm just going to live here. My parents lived
correct.
here, their parents lived here. This is the farmland. You're like, dude, the lava is coming at you. But like, no, what do you do, right?
Yeah, correct, correct. So I think
It's crazy.
that's where I
But
think,
yeah, how do corporates approach this, Deblina? Because you do the same thing with teams, with corporate makeovers, if you lack of a better word. So how do they receive? Because of course there are corporates are also made of individuals, of course
correct,
represented by a larger entity. But how are they open to these new ideas, these new stories, changing the narrative, unlearning ways?
correct. So I think there are various levels of, first similar thing corporates go to, right? Or foundations go through. They have to
Yeah,
themselves again do the same thing, find their story, tell their story, and live their story in
yeah,
a very similar way as an individual has to do, right? So a lot of
hmm,
times it's about, are they really, it's like imagine Cinderella's story. Cinderella wanted happiness or happily ever after. But
yeah,
what the godmother gave her was the magic wand, right? Or, that basically the shoes.
yeah,
She didn't take her to the ball. Cinderella had to do the steps herself, right? So
yeah,
I think that is a very small point,
and deal with the
which we bring out,
consequences of breaking the rules.
consequences of
Yeah,
your actions, right?
yeah.
So how far is your story or is your solution taking someone, and what else
Mhm.
do they need to do to find the outcome which they need? The two may not
Correct.
be same, right? So
Mm.
what we do is, a lot of my work is either helping people understand this for themselves, which is through workshops and through kind of discussions like this,
Mhm.
and the other side is actually helping them, and like you said earlier, unlearn some of the things which they were doing earlier and
Yeah.
then recraft some of these things. And it also is execution, right? So actually
Yeah.
work on programs, because I love working with data, to
Yeah.
bring in data from the ground, to maybe bring in impact systems,
Right.
to find out who else need to be involved. So it's not about just a single person saying I will do this whole thing. It doesn't happen
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
that in some of the problems. So it's about rebuilding that story, and also figuring out who do you need to rebuild that story. So that means
Yeah.
finding partners, that means getting the right data, all of those aspects, putting that in place
Yeah.
at a programmatic level, right? So it may
Yeah.
not be that the entire organization has everything figured out at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same time. Maybe they
But
do
also,
it once
for an
and back.
organization to work, right?
Yeah,
I feel, and correct me if you've experienced differently, but when you hear all these things online, of course, online is where I go to because that's where a lot of stuff is fed to people.
yeah,
You have
yeah,
these things that you can be anything, you can be a hero, you can be a millionaire, get quick rich schemes, all these things, right? So now a corporate or a company to succeed has to have multiple people working together for the greater good, if you want to call it, or for the company's profitability or for the company's growth. Now, if everyone wants to become the CEO, there's going to be a lot of tension. You know what I mean?
correct,
So
correct.
when this mindset is being fed to people when they go home or they're online and they're reading Facebook or they're reading all these YouTube motivational videos of like how Elon Musk got rich, whatever, and next thing they're saying, no, you have to work with other people because remember, you're not important. The company and the team is important. The team and the company is important. How do you deal with conflicting things, or are they even conflicting in the first place?
They are often,
Yeah.
so that's why multiple levels I see this playing out, this finding,
Mhm.
living, and telling the story.
Yeah.
This plays out at multiple levels. So I might be today, thinking of being say the CEO of company X, right? And
Yeah.
company X already has a CEO, and company X is doing very well.
Yeah.
And I'm
Because
a
Sundar
small
Pichai, of
cog.
course, I'm sure every Indian kid wants to be the next Sundar Pichai, right?
Yeah,
With,
I'm a small cog in the wheel today, right?
yeah.
But I think the thing is, uh, what am I really doing to really become that CEO if I want to, right? So
Yeah.
it goes back to a few things I think which are very important. One is what I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about, right?
Yeah.
10,000 hours. So we
Okay.
need to put in a lot of time in
That's an
building our
outliers,
own
right? Yeah. Yeah.
outliers, right?
Yeah.
So the time which we put in building our skills or in really building expertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second is which has to be really in depth, right? Otherwise,
Of
there's no
course.
point in even dreaming if we don't put in the time to actually skill ourselves for the dream.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
and the
I mean, it's not a
second thing,
joke. 10,000 hours is 10
it's not
years.
a
I think he
joke.
says 4 hours
Yeah.
for 10 years, something like that, right?
Yeah. It's not a joke. And I think people who do it consistently, I have seen them get
Mm-hmm.
the benefits of that. That's one. Second
Yeah.
is, often you can't do it alone. So the network, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, there's a book, for example, which calls it positive deviance, right? So
Right.
you find a network of people who are almost pulling you up because they're all doing inspirational things and you are
Mm.
also doing inspirational things and you pull each other up, right?
Yeah.
So being part of a circle like that, so your world is not just you and what the society is owing you, but it's
Yeah.
about you contributing also to society and pulling people up,
Yeah.
right?
I feel that
I think
sense of entitlement sometimes is a big
yes,
roadblock.
yes,
That,
yes,
I can only become big at the expense of putting others down. That's not,
correct,
and that's what we've been sold, and
yeah,
it sadly is not for the betterment. And I'm telling you from a personal experience in stand up, is at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, the mindset and the thought process that was driving me was not making people laugh and having a good time and sharing in the joy of laughter. I mean, however romantic or silly that sounds, but was, why aren't I getting the claim I need? Why am
correct,
I not getting the Netflix deals? Why am I not getting the big management representation? And then I took a step back, and that's when I told you, right, 3 years back versus now, I
correct,
took a step back going, first of all, you don't deserve shit, right? No one's told you, there's no game plan that said that by the time you're 40, and that's when people resort to astrology, right? By the time I'm 40,
correct,
things will change, which is the completely wrong way of looking at it, as opposed to saying you need to put certain things, unlearn certain things, change your practices, change certain things, do something diligently. That's when you see the change, as opposed to that I'm
correct,
going to sit back and wait for my destiny to take over, which is great in stories and it's a great storytelling tool. But I'm sure you know as well, when you mentioned destiny, Harry Potter's destiny was to be killed by Voldemort, but then you realize that it was in his own hands, kind of thing, right?
correct,
But
correct,
it's such a weird kind of place you reach when the motivations are reinforced by the entitlement that money is the only motivation, and entitlement that you would deserve it but you're not getting it because someone, whether it's in America now the white man, or in India it's the upper caste or the someone is blocking your path. That's what, and as a result what happens, as opposed to looking within, and as you said, the story that you change inside, finding your story, telling your story, living your story, you start pointing and saying that story is not right for me, as to, in the
correct.
sense, someone else's story is coming the way of my story.
Correct, correct. And I think the minute you think of it as a story,
Yeah.
it actually unlocks a lot of this confusion which we build for ourselves in our own
Yeah.
minds. So I think there are many ways to do it. Spirituality does it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mindfulness practices do it. A lot
And
of
I think just one
motivational,
thing is looking at your story for what it is. Because what
yeah,
tends to happen
exactly.
is we sold all these stories and we try to fit our lives into
Into
those
somebody
stories.
else. Yeah,
Yeah. So we're like, no, no, instead of, and instead of making your own story, as you said, finding your story with all its inadequacies and its positiveness, for telling your story in the with imperfections that you have, and the perfection or the things that make you truly unique, and
right.
finally living that story which only you can live, because that's the opportunity you call
That's
life
the
that you've
truth.
been
Yeah,
gifted.
that's your
Right.
truth. Yeah,
Instead of
yeah,
that,
that's
you
your
want to say, how can I be Elon Musk, without doing the work and the obsession and the love he has for rockets or for space or for colonization of Mars? Because that guy
yeah.
truly is exceptional in his dedication to what he does. Whether it's Elon
And
Musk,
he,
yeah,
yeah, and he said this, right? I think I read it somewhere. I don't know if he said this or somebody else said this about him, but he said people think I'm lucky, but I've been working 16 hours a day
yeah,
on things around tech for all my life. So he's
yeah.
put in
It's
his
not easy.
time.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's brilliant, but there are
I
many
mean,
brilliant
but
people
people
who
only look at
think,
the money. They look at the fact that
yeah,
he's worth 200 billion. No one looks at the fact that, okay, they look at, oh yeah, but how is he as a person who's divorced? I'm like, why are we looking? It's like, even when Tiger Woods crashed a car, yeah, he's addicted to drugs. I'm like, dude, see, celebrate Tiger Woods for the great golfer that he is. But
Yeah.
the thing is also, this is the one unidimensional aspect to a human, right? You can't
Correct.
just take one thing and celebrate. You have to look at the entire person for what they are and take them at that.
Correct.
Okay, he's great at golf, but he also may have issues because he spent so many hours on the golf course. Might not
Correct.
have the best, intimacy sort of plan, right? But no,
Correct.
we're so critical when the person does something wrong, but we're
Correct.
so in awe of them until that thing hits the fan.
I agree. I agree. If you give me the permission, I'll just recite a small poem which I wrote,
Please do. That'll be
which
lovely. Thank you for sharing it on the podcast.
I kind of think it encapsulates this, what we are talking about. So I called it the Bookmarks Tale. So it
The
called the
bookmark. The okay.
Bookmarks Tale.
Okay.
So it goes like this. Was it page 479 that I fell from? I can't find it. My page, my book, I search. The story I was part of has now moved on without me. Restless waves pull me, I toss. Restless waves pull me, I toss. Drenched, stripped of my old identity. No need to belong, nothing to prove, I live. That's it.
That
It's just a
is
small poem,
no, that
but
is, I think, beautiful because of this idea that even a bookmark, had this sense of belonging and
correct,
a sense of expectation that I'm going to be a part of the story, but taken away and the closure saying, you know what, I'm not what I was, but I'm totally fine with it.
and it's
And
okay.
yeah.
I can have a
And
new
you
life.
live,
So
in fact, when you let go of
yeah,
all these stories that, and so many times, and this is for most people, I'm going to take a bold step and say it, that they're living stories that are told by someone else, or
hmm,
now it's by YouTube or by anyone. And I'll tell you personally as well, and I mentioned this a few times on the podcast. So if people are listening right now, like, dude, again, here he goes. Can the guest talk? I'm like, no, I'm going to say it again. Is when you stop focusing on what you can't do. In my case, the disability, whatever you want to call it, eye condition. And as a result, I can't play tennis, which I could when I was 5. I can't drive, which my friends do. I can't read a book, which which someone else. You'll find people and you kind of identify each person with this thing that you are inadequate, right? This friend goes jogging. So you start like hating on that person, going, oh, that person, like, and it becomes a bit of the ego thing, right? But
correct,
the moment that goes from, you know what, I'm not going to focus on what I can't do, but I'm going to focus on what I can do. And that's with all its things. That's what you said. Right? That's finding your story. Now that's the larger
correct,
story. Within that, you have different sub stories. Right now, will it be a story about my life, about my journey going forward, and telling it has different mediums. All these things: podcasting, storytelling, or even just living your life is a way of telling your story. And finally,
correct,
that is the beautiful release of this bookmark, which you spoke about. Is that when you shed all these things that you were terrifyingly hiding behind, shivering, going, without this, I'm stripped away, I have no identity, which a lot of Indians and a lot of people in the world do behind their designation or their academic
correct,
achievements, or their resume for that matter. You strip that away, that's when you truly live, and that's where change comes in, and that's when you are just
correct,
like, you know what? I'm no longer scared of uncertainty or scared of judgment or scared of failure.
correct. Exactly. No, I think, and I think some of us have been through this. Some of us maybe will be going through this. Some of
Yeah,
us are scared of, hurtling into this, but
yeah.
it at some point will hit us, all of us,
It
right?
it
It's
it,
about,
it has to. That's
has to
that's
hit us.
life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
But I think,
yeah. Sorry, go on.
no, no, I think so. I think some of the practical considerations. So I think, like you mentioned, it should not sound like motivational, things which
Preachy.
we read, like, each one
Yeah,
of us can, achieve whatever we want to in life,
yeah.
because that can also be very misleading and a little bit too much of, you know, uh, build up of,
Yeah,
emotion and, dreams,
yeah.
because people could choose to have a very simple life and be exceedingly happy. And, like you
Absolutely.
said earlier, that is their story and that's what they're living as their story, right? So I
Yeah, and
think it's a
Tim
choice.
mentioned this comedian, Australian comedian, I think, mentioned,
Correct, correct,
um,
correct.
if you have your sights set on one big goal, which is
Yeah,
whether making $1 million or whether it's getting that CEO job or whether it's getting that funding
correct,
role, whatever. If your eyes are too, if you're too set on that goal far ahead, you are not looking around in the periphery, right? And I
correct.
think what he meant and what I interpret from that is, if you're only waiting, like if I'm only waiting for that massive Netflix deal, number one, when I get there, that Netflix might seem like the most trivial thing, which was stupid.
Yeah,
Secondly, I'm not looking at the small thing that can make life that much more exciting. The small daily
correct,
things. Number
correct,
one, the encounters, the chance to interact with people, which Number one is just more fulfilling. It's a small little
Correct.
thing that makes you smile. It's a small little interaction that makes you go, you know what? It's fun. Maybe it's going out for like a little drive and getting a cup of coffee, whatever it may be, right? Because others will be like, oh, this coffee sucks. It'll only be great when I get Netflix. You know what I mean? Or when I get that deal, I'll be sitting in this place. But most importantly, when you're not looking at these small things that life throws at you, these small opportunities, interactions, you are avoiding the chance to explore different avenues that open up, which you didn't even
Correct.
know existed.
Correct. Correct. And I
Which I
think
think
two
is
points.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. 2 points there. One is, as you rightly said, what I also feel is you might have very big goals, but
yeah.
once you achieve them, there's a sense of emptiness, which I'm sure all of us have
Mm.
gone through, right? So, for example, for me, you know, having my being an author was something I never thought I could be. I always thought I'm a person of numbers, and who
Yeah,
am I thinking of? Why should I become an author? Why should
yeah,
anybody read me? So when I became published, it was supposedly a huge moment for me, but I felt emptiness after I got
yeah,
that goal. Similarly, writing for OTT was the next logical step, but once that
yeah.
happened, I felt emptiness, right? So once you achieve the goal, I think oftentimes you don't really feel that you are nowhere different. You're at the same
Yeah.
place. You're the same person. So you
You
don't
think
feel
that
that.
goal is going to make you a better person. It doesn't.
Yeah,
In
it
fact,
doesn't, right?
it needs to be, it's a scratch that needs to be itched up for sure.
Correct,
But I
exactly.
think, I'm glad that you are saying it because you have achieved a lot. And someone
Yeah, I
hearing this
think
saying, you know what, she's done it. So she's saying it means something. Because, something as simple as the beauty of practicing every day and not
correct,
even like saying, I'm going to pick up an instrument to play at a concert or make a YouTube
correct,
channel. But you know what? Literally, I'm going to play the same pattern. And next Monday, after 7 days of doing it, instead of going, you know, slowly, clumsily, I'm playing it fluently. You don't feel empty. You feel like, okay, great. Now what's the next step? It's a
yes.
small, small
It's a
little
learning.
win.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
little
And I think that's what
learning.
you remember, right? So, for
Yeah.
example, I might have forgotten that moment, but I remember when I thought of my first character for my book,
Yeah.
how that
Absolutely.
thought came to me, I remember. Or, I remember when I helped one organization come up with a really different way of telling their story, the
Yeah.
happiness I felt when they accepted that story, right? So, I think those smaller moments are what you remember because somehow I think they are very visceral, right? And
Yeah.
you kind of live through them, and therefore the journey is the story, is what I
And
feel
it
now.
gives you in fact it fuels you on.
Correct,
It
correct.
doesn't
And you
sort of,
can,
yeah, because it's not like, it almost feels like the big goal. Afterwards you're almost like, my tank is empty.
correct, correct,
Let me
correct,
fill it up with another goal.
correct. Exactly, exactly. And
But
I think living from goal to goal is also pretty hard, right? And
it's
on that
tiring,
note, it is
because that
tiring.
goal
It is
might not come through, and next thing you're like, oh my god, I put all this fuel into this tank and nothing's
correct,
come through. I
correct,
mean,
correct,
it's important to drive home this message, because I think even something as simple as waking up half an hour earlier and feeling better about it is a big win. you
correct.
know or
Exactly. It's
maybe
a
not,
big
or
win.
maybe, yeah, not eating, overindulging in unhealthy sweets for one meal. It's a big, people just say, no, until you lose 80 kilos you're not fit. But for
Yeah,
someone who's trying to lose weight or trying to avoid sweets, not doing one thing is better than losing 80 kilos, I think.
correct,
you know
correct. And I think on that note, I mean, I read a lot of Japanese books. There's a book I read recently called The Convenience Store Woman.
Convenience
Convenience
store
store.
visit. Okay, woman.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's by an author called Sayaka Murata, in case I'm pronouncing it correctly. But it speaks to this point which you raised right now. This is lady who doesn't feel like she fits into society. She feels that she can't fit in, and the only place she feels where she's authentic is inside the convenience store where she works, and that's a dream. Her
Right.
dream is to every day work in that convenience store, and people don't get it. They
Yeah.
think she should get a different life. They think this is a stopgap.
Yeah.
They think something else is waiting around the corner for her, and she does give into some of those stories, like you said, somebody else's story for her.
Yeah.
But then what happens? Is it really her story, or is the convenience store really her story?
Yeah.
It's again a very beautiful depiction of the fact that simplicity is
Yeah.
something we often forsake,
And we don't
because
take and we don't
yeah,
like salute it.
yeah, correct,
Like
exactly,
for instance, there's one lady, like similarly, who works at a clothing store. I'm sure you'll remember a person. I'm not saying this lady, but I'm sure you'll remember an experience where you didn't expect a person to go out of their way to
correct,
give you a great experience at their shop. It could have been a grocery store, could have been a stationery shop, could have been anything. But
correct,
like that person, you're like, you probably think, oh, this person probably wants to join a call center or make 10 times more money. But when you do meet that person who's so happy serving you your food at a restaurant, takes pride in it, you feel that you're better for it. Your life is richer for it because,
Correct.
and I think, you don't see that too much of that. But when you do, like whether it's a drink, someone like takes enthusiasm, going, you really like this drink. I hope you're having a good time because I love this music. They feel and you feel as a result, it's so nice.
Yeah, correct. No, I actually faced this. I remember this was actually a guide in Kerala. So we had gone to Kerala,
Yeah.
and there was this guide who was, wandering around with us. And, like many guides, have a natural good storytelling style. But
Yeah.
this person was, enjoying himself so much. And
Yeah.
he was talking about spices. And then when he went to the history of spices and he talked about, he was so well read. And, I
Yeah.
anyway love history. So much knowledge I got from the 2 hours, I spent with him.
Yeah.
And that's he was enjoying himself, that
You probably,
job and that moment was the
yeah.
story.
And you probably don't even remember the specifics of the monuments or whatever you were looking at.
Correct,
But
correct.
Kerala is a better place in your mind because of his story, right?
Because of him, yeah, because of him. And I think that's what each of us maybe sometimes miss out. We are always in the rush for the next goal and for the
Yeah.
next page in our story. But what about today? What about today's page?
Yeah,
Whichever
I
page
love
we are
that's why
on,
the culture of the English pubs, because that's
yeah,
what it is. And we had the see the problem is we demonize drinking. Of course,
yeah,
this is not
yeah,
even going down that path. But some of the best conversations around the pub, around the bar, when you're sitting and talking, and you meet
correct,
everyone from across the board, like an investment banker to a guy who's a plumber. And I wish we had more of that culture, where
correct,
people would talk. And I think that's what this one's book is, right? Talking to strangers. That's I think
yeah, yeah,
Malcolm
yeah,
Gladwell's book.
correct, correct,
I mean, and
correct,
I think, just reaching out, people are scared. What will they think of me? Man, this he's got a designation. I think everyone is dying to share their story. And
correct.
sadly, we have this filter that, what, I'm a CEO, I can only be seen on a podcast with this many followers. It's
Yeah,
bullshit. I reach out anyone. I've written to some comedians with like 5 million followers. I'm like, what's going if they don't reply, it's
yeah,
going to be the
big
same. If
deal.
they do, big deal. But if they do respond, I get a chance to share my story. They get a chance to share their story.
Correct,
Which
correct, correct.
which leads me to the pure storytelling part of your life, which is
Yeah.
you being an author. But can you tell me about, and my listeners, about the book that you've written, you published? And of course, at the end, I want you to share all the creds of where they can find your book, where they can log in to find more about your company, about your organization, which is Chabi, and the other one. So that's later. But if you could just tell us about your what led you to write this book, where the story was born, and what the story is about.
Sure. So I have grown up reading a lot of crime fiction. My
Mm-hmm.
grandfather was a criminal lawyer.
Oh, okay.
So and history.
Are you
I
from
want to be.
Bangalore, Debleena? Sorry, this is
I'm from Calcutta.
you're
I'm
from
from
Calcutta. Okay.
Calcutta. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but been living in Bangalore long enough now to call it my second home.
Lovely.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. So this book actually came from two things, 2 points. One was, I've been working in the startup world for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw, both the sides, the dreams and the craziness of the dream, as well as, what happened when some of the dreams can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
So that was one part. And the other part of it is the growing use of, I think you mentioned in the beginning, Sandeep, that with technology, sometimes our identities, so identity itself and identity theft is not new, right? It's been happening since ages. We have con
Yeah.
men, and a loss of identity is that much more, dangerous. And
Yeah.
so that was where the idea came from. What happens, when murder could be more than murder of a body? What if it's murder of an identity? What
Mm.
if it's murder of an idea? Right. So in my book,
Oh,
I explore
right.
all three. So it's a who done it and a why done it.
So it's a murder
So
of a physical being, the identity, and the idea.
and the idea. So there are three different
Okay.
kind of murders which I explore
Mm-hmm.
through the
So I
book.
say, what do you mean by murder of idea? I'm a little confused on that one.
The startup, right? I mean, your
Oh, right,
idea of
that
a
idea.
startup
Oh, you mean the concept? Okay, okay, that idea. Right, right.
concept, right?
So
What if
like it's
somebody
almost like
kills the idea?
plagiarism. Right, right.
Yeah, somebody killing the idea. So these are the three concepts that you've explored in the book, but in the guise of a whodunit. So it's a classic whodunit. So there is a, obviously a antagonist who I've used the first person voice of the antagonist, so that people kind of get into the mind of the antagonist and find out later that the person is one of the characters we are introducing in the book. And
Oh,
it's set
so
in Bangalore.
this person is already he is the or she is the is the person behind the crime, but
Yes.
you don't you're being told the story from them, so you don't so you know that they're the antagonist, but you don't know who they are in the story.
Yeah. So the
Hey,
person
that's
comes
quite
every
cool.
few chapters, and there's a third person voice which narrates and takes the story forward.
But you don't
So it's
know.
based
Yeah, of course, you don't
you
know
don't
who it
know
is.
who the
Yeah.
antagonist is. So it's based in Bangalore.
Right.
It's based in Bangalore because I've kind of been very lucky to have come to Bangalore and got a lot of my learnings from Bangalore. So
Right.
it's got a lot of characters which we see in Bangalore. It's got a very ambitious cook. It's got a startup founder. It's got a
Nice.
retired couple who are trying to find meaning in their lives. It's got an
Yeah.
investigative journalist. It's got an archaeologist. Right. So these are the
Yeah.
characters you see in the book, which is a slice of life of Bangalore. But there's also a crime which happens, and then
It's
these three
amazing for that
questions.
because when spoke to you last, you had mentioned Anita Nair, right? And
Correct.
I
Correct.
haven't had access to too many Indian authors because of the audio version not being available. Of course, like the bigger names like Salman Rushdie's book is
Correct.
available, or maybe I think then after I spoke to you, I checked out Anita Nair and found her book Cut Like Wound,
Correct.
which is set in Bangalore, and there's some joy when you hear of this certain thing which you might have walked past. Like I'll give you an example when I read. Like say Walter Scott. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
sound
Yeah.
pretentious, but when I do read Walter Scott, or I read say even like a David Hewson, or I read someone who writes a lot about a certain city, when you go to these cities, for me the guide is that author,
Yes.
whether it's
Yes.
whoever the author may be.
Yeah.
But when I read Anita Nair, it was so nice, right? That constable,
Correct.
that
Inspector
area.
Gora.
Yeah, Inspector Gowda. And so is your book available on
Yes,
in
it's
Audible,
there on
in audio?
Amazon. It's
Okay.
no, not on Audible. It's there on Amazon right now,
Okay.
and yeah, Amazon and Flipkart right now. I think I will try to see whether I can make a audio version of it. But the OTT
Yeah.
version of it, I think hopefully will come soon as well. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think the idea what you
Sorry,
said,
what's the
Sandeep.
book called? I think people are. I think.
Yeah, it's called A Marketplace for Murder.
Hey, how cool! And that's interesting. It's on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. And it's also a dig on some of the things which go wrong in the very capitalism driven world. Uh,
Yeah, there is a lot to write about over there. I'm so glad you said it in Bangalore because I think Bangalore gets a little boxed in as the tech city alone. But I think
correct,
there's so
correct,
many nuances to Bangalore that truly can't be replicated. Of course, it does have the bane of living in big cities, which is traffic and
correct,
pollution
correct,
and noise. But there are quaint Bangaloreisms which I think not
correct,
many people know about.
correct. The
Which I've
afternoon rain. So
Afternoon
I've spoken about
rain.
the afternoon rain. I've spoken
Yeah,
about the food, right? And the, the Durga Puja, which some of us,
yeah,
experience in Bangalore. So there's so many beautiful things which the
yeah.
city gives you.
And even
And
the culture of we I think at least the Bangalore I grew up in was not limited to a certain demographic in the sense
yes,
we did
yes,
all live in our respective areas, but there was no thing that he being from a Brahmin Maleshwaram will not
yes,
go to a certain Shivaji Nagar, which is predominantly Muslim. Like I
correct,
would, being in a certain part of Bangalore, I would go here for ice cream. I would go there. We didn't have the concept of coffee shops back then, but I would go eat a
correct.
roll over here. And I think we were less inhibited to meet new
Isolated.
people. Yeah, and inhibited to meet new people. We would talk to strangers, if that's the word, and we would be
Correct,
happy to, and I think that is still there in thing where, I'm not Kannadiga, I'm not a Kannada speaker, I'm not a North Indian, I'm a Bangalorean. That was
correct,
one thing which sort of brought us together, which I feel
correct.
now there's like, oh, how can you say Bangalore? It's Bengaluru. I'm like, dude, just fuck off. It's like, it's so petty.
Yeah, but
So,
I think the city as a character is something I feel a lot of authors bring in. Like you mentioned, Anita Nair had done it in her book, and I think
yeah,
partly I've tried that because the city has given me a lot. And
yeah,
the two cities I've lived in, Bangalore and Calcutta, both I love. I really
yeah.
love both.
Very
Um,
different in their energy, but
in
very,
their
very
energies, yeah,
rich in their energy as well. I think, I've been to
correct, correct,
Calcutta twice, and I
yeah,
went for the first time to Park Street last 2019 December, and I was like,
yeah, yeah.
how can so many human beings fit in one damn place, man? And what's that really famous restaurant on the corner?
Debleenas or Flurries,
Sorry,
Flurries.
no, I'll tell you what this place was. It was so cool. It had a more Western sounding name. Anyhow,
Okay,
so this place was dinner with drinks, of course. And then once it closed for dinner, there were a bunch of people just sitting on the stairs outside because this place turns into a drinking, like a
yes,
watering hole till 4 in the morning.
correct,
I forget the name of the place. It was really cool. But we were there only for a day or two. And of course, the Calcutta, my dad talks about because he used to visit for work when he was working with ITC. They had a big presence
correct,
in Calcutta.
correct,
So he was
correct,
showing us places. He's like, but man, this is all crap I can't recognize because we stayed by the airport. He's like, I didn't even know this part of Calcutta existed. And there's this massive welcome ITC hotel, which is now in
yes,
Calcutta. I'm
yes,
sure you've seen it. We're like,
yes,
whoa, it's like a mountain.
yeah, correct, correct, correct.
But
So
that's the thing. That's the thing with Calcutta. Like Bangalore, I feel there are people who love stories. I mean, this is of course from
yes,
my very limited knowledge. I've been to a couple of places and mainly the nightlife. it's more, it's not as manic as a Delhi or a Bombay.
Yeah, it's slower. I think it's
Yeah.
also because a lot of us deserted the city, right? A lot of us in our
Yeah.
generation, we left the city, right? So we
Yeah.
go back. We couldn't make our living there. We
Yeah,
came out.
you should talk to Anubhav Pal. He'll have, I'm sure you heard or know of him.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So he's got a similar take on Calcutta, and Saurav Ghosh has a lovely bit
Yes,
on Calcutta, growing up as a Bengali in Calcutta,
correct,
and he has
correct,
this
correct.
lovely bit. He goes, "We Bengalis leave Calcutta and we come back to die. It's like a migration or something like
It's
that."
a yeah, yeah. But I think the city. I mean, I don't know. I think both the cities influence me a lot. So in my writing, I'm sure, and I write a lot now on historical. So next few books I'm writing are more historical crimes.
Oh,
So
thank
and I'm
you. I'm
exploring.
so glad you're doing this because I feel, when you read about Indian history, there's so much, but it's always
Yeah,
told,
yeah.
either it's not in English or it's told through the eyes of a foreign
Correct,
visitor. Whether,
correct,
what's that
correct.
person's name? The guy,
William Dalrymple.
yeah, that's the guy, right? That's the guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like, even for instance, there's a really good series by Bernard Cornwell called the Sharp series,
Yes,
where
yes,
Richard
yes.
Sharp is one of these infantrymen in the British Raj, and
Correct,
he's a red coat and going through all these
correct,
Srirangapatnam and then the Maratha War. I'm like, I'd
correct.
love to hear it, historical fiction, historical crime, whether it's
Yes,
set like it through the court of the Mysore Maharaja, through an Indian's
exactly.
point of view. I'd love to hear it. So I'm so glad that you're doing this.
Yeah, so that's the next few books I'm writing are all historical crime and historical fiction, and it's either
Lovely.
going to be in Karnataka because I'm living here and I want to explore more, and there's so
Uh-huh.
much history, or it's going to
Yeah.
be Bengal because again there's so much untold
There's so
history.
much there. Yeah,
Yeah,
The Bengal, like, who's the person who, the last book, was it Amitav Ghosh? Who,
Amitabh Ghosh. Yeah,
the book was set in Calcutta, right? The Sea of Poppies. There's one part
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
Calcutta.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, I would love more of that, like, because there's so much. If you go back, even before that, like the whole the presidency of Calcutta was so rich
Correct,
in,
correct,
and there's so many, of course, subtle things. I've heard some podcasts about, I think there's that lady, Dame Judy Dench. I think grew up in India during the British Raj, and she was talking about her perspective. So, like that, there's so many small things which are beautiful. And
correct.
I'd love to introduce you to a couple of people who'd be great audiobook narrators.
That
I'd
will
love
be
to do
great.
it. Unfortunately, I can't, but I can do it. But I'll just read a different story, just someone else's. But no, Jagdish Raja would do justice to your story. He's an amazing.
Yeah, Jagdish Raja. I think you had told me about him. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, he runs Jagriti. Him, his wife, and him.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think Vivek Madan's another good guy to. I'll put you in touch with them. I think they're great
Great,
people
great,
to read out your book. But
great.
cool. So I'm so excited that you're doing this, and I think we should wrap it up because I think
Yes.
you've got a busy day and you're a very busy person, and I don't want you to waste more time than needed.
No, thank you. I
But
mean, this was really good. It's like the Saturday evening, Saturday afternoon chai and discussion, right? So thank you for
yeah, no,
bringing that alive online.
I'm glad I'm glad you felt nice being here because this is something I want to bring out an entire sort of person and not just one part of their story. So if people want to find your book, of course, it's called Marketplace
Marketplace
Murder.
for Murder. It's there
Marketplace for
on
Murder,
Amazon. Yeah, it's there on
Flipkart and
Amazon.
Amazon.
Yes.
And if they want to check out your work, that is Chabi, and the other one, where can you give them the website links? I can put it down in the
Yes.
description, of course.
Yeah. So kahania.org. That's my website. That's my storytelling work,
That's
Kahania.
for corporates and
That's
other
for
organizations. Yeah,
corporates and corporates and organizations. And the learning work which I do education is Chabi,
lovely,
CHAABEE.in, Chabi. Yeah, and my
fantastic.
writing, I write a lot. So I think yeah,
Do you
so
have a
I'll keep
website where
writing.
people can find your work, your
No,
blogs, or your?
unfortunately, I think I have to do that. I
Okay,
tried putting up a Substack, newsletter, which is
uh-huh.
debleena.substack.in, but
I've
I've
heard about it.
not got
Yes.
time to be very regular, honestly. So
So
I
are you
will
on
try
social
to do
media
that.
where they can find you, or
Yes,
is there
I'm
an
very active on LinkedIn and Twitter.
lovely?
LinkedIn, I'm there by name, Debleena Majumdar,
Uh-huh.
and Twitter is Debleena R. I'm very
Lovely.
active on these two. I think I'm not so active on Instagram and Facebook.
Ah, it's okay. It's
Uh,
overrated anyway. But
yeah,
you can Deblina R. That's on Twitter, and of course,
and
I'll put all
Debleena
the thing.
Majumdar on LinkedIn. I'm active on
Excellent.
these two, and yeah, I keep writing.
Deblina, thank you so much for agreeing to do this episode, and thanks for sharing your story, and thanks for all the great work you're doing. Appreciate it.
No, thank you so much, Sandeep. Really enjoyed it, and all the very best for your podcast. And look forward to being in touch. And thank you to everyone who will listen to this. Thank you.
Thank you.